All right, here we are. I'm excited today. I got the guy in the college baseball world, Kendall Rogers with D1Baseball.com. And what a career he's built in a fantastic website over there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about D1 Baseball a little bit later in the show. But Kendall Rogers is with us, and glad to have him here to talk about opening series SEC weekend. LSU, number one ranked team in the country, and played a pretty weak schedule, been very dominant with that weak schedule, but now the rubber hits the road and they play somebody on the road. Looks like there's going to be some inclement weather. And so, Kendall, welcome in, man. Talk about glad to have you here.
Yeah, man, it's good. It's good to be here. It's SEC play, and if you look at the weather, it's typical SEC opening weekend weather. I was just talking to my dad who lives up in College Station. He was sleeting there this morning, so it will not be the most optimal weather, but there'll be plenty of fireworks in the field, so it should be a fun series.
The weather isn't much better here in Baton Rouge. It's been raining all morning. I think it's cleared a little bit, but it's going to be nonstop. So, but you're saying it'll be cleared out by game time?
Yeah, so it's raining here in Houston, but like in College Station, I think it's just partly cloudy right now. But it's going to be chilly. I've always told people Bluebell Park's like the coldest place in America or the hottest place in America, just because of the way it sets up and the wind and things like that. And it really could have an effect on the series, because if you look at the weather the next 3 days, tonight's going to be a pretty stiff wind coming straight in from left field. So I think if you're the Tigers or you're the Aggies and you're looking to win this game with a long ball, it probably isn't going to happen tonight. But thankfully for both teams, you got two really good pitchers going at it. So I don't think the long ball is going to decide much tonight to begin with.
I watched one of your interviews. It was on Texags earlier in the week, and you were talking about a pretty stiff wind that's going to be blowing in. And of course, LSU can do it a lot of ways at the plate, sure, but certainly the long ball and what those guys have done so far has been fantastic, especially Tommy Tanks coming in after the injury, and he's catching up in a big way with his home runs. And I guess the number that he probably thought he would have had by this point.
Yeah. What's really funny, you mentioned Tommy, but what's really funny, he might be the one guy who can hit it out in these elements, because, typically he's more of kind of a line drive kind of home run hitter. If you look back at last year, most of his home runs in NC State, a lot of them were oppo, and a lot of them were just on a laser beam. Really didn't get that much off the ground. So he's actually kind of fits pretty well with this weather. But I think the biggest thing for me when I look at these two teams, and the reason why I'm pretty confident in LSU in the series, I just think when you look at the Tigers top to bottom of this lineup, we talked so much about Dylan and Trey Morgan and guys like that. But I mean, you look up and down that lineup, Jared Jones has gotten big hits for them this year. Paxton Clean got off to a little bit of a slow start, but, I loved him in the fall, and he's been, really good the last couple of weeks. Gavin Dugas is a kid that, many people weren't talking about coming into the season, and he's really stepped up from an offensive standpoint. So as much as we talk about those guys at the top, the guys at the middle to the bottom have also taken care of business. And that's what's kind of made this lineup, in my opinion, go from, really good to, frankly, pretty lethal.
Look, you cover this just as well. You cover every team just as well as most LSU baseball fans follow singularly their own team. And one of the things that we've seen and getting comments from former players, and we've seen some great teams in the last 30 to 35 years, is, the schedule's been weak up to this point, but it's just been the sheer dominance that they've won these games. And I asked Jay Johnson a few days ago when we had him for the media opportunity about his bullpen, and had they gotten as much work as he'd like. And that's when he started hemming and hawing a little bit, and I don't think he has. But then the next media guy said, yeah, but that's also a good thing how fresh they are. So it can be a double-edged sword for him. But it is amazing if the trajectory of this team, despite the competition, just how brutal they've won some of these games by.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, because it's kind of a little bit like Wake Forest. I mean, a lot of people said a couple weeks in the season, like, oh, Wake hasn't played anybody. But to me, there's a difference between playing a weak schedule and barely getting by in some of these games, or playing a weak schedule and absolutely murdering people in some of these games. And, LSU, the last, 8 out of the last 9 games, they scored double-digit runs. the one game they didn't score double-digit runs, they scored 9 against Lamar, who's a much improved team this year. Like Will Davis has done a really nice job with him. They also beat A&M in the midweek a couple weeks ago. And so, I've been ultra impressed. I mean, obviously you had the singular, Iowa stinker, but that's just one of those games that kind of got away from them a little bit. But, other than that, they've been really good. I do think when you look at this series, it does present some challenges. Obviously, the weather, doesn't really help an ultra offensive team. But, I do think when you look at A&M overall, that is a rotation that I would say when they're on, they can be really good. I mean, Nathan Detmer, I was on a show.
That's what I was about to ask you about, the matchup tonight between Skeens and Detmer. I mean, that's two of the finest pitchers in America. They're going to be on the mound tonight.
Well, it just depends on which Detmer shows up, really. I mean, if you look back at Omaha last year, Mike, I mean, against Oklahoma, he was awful. Against Notre Dame, 4 or 5 days later, he was brilliant. He was brilliant last year against Vanderbilt. He was terrible in some of his other starts. So he's one of those guys. I mean, he looks like Tarzan. I mean, he's like 6'4", 225. Like Paul Skeens kind of laughs because he's like, oh man, that's little. But I mean, he's 6'4", 225. Like as a prospect, he is the way you draw it up. He's going to be 94 to 96 up to 97 with his fastball. But the big thing to keep an eye on if you're an LSU fan is he landing his slider for strikes early on? If he's landing that nasty slider for strikes early on, he's going to get in a groove. LSU's really going to have to work at it. I would say the other thing I think Jay's going to do tonight too is they're going to make him fill the ball. If you look back at last year's Oklahoma game, you can actually find highlights if you go on YouTube of last year's Oklahoma game. Oklahoma and Reggie Willis, their offensive mastermind that leads their offense, coaching-wise, like they made him make plays with a bunt. And I know that's not the way Jay really wants to do things, but if you go and look at how he fielded bunts last year, it was bad. Like it was really bad. And so I expect LSU to kind of surprise A&M a little bit and kind of put some pressure on them in a variety of ways tonight, make him make plays. I think on Paul Skeens' side, I think the biggest thing for him is, if you're Jay – really, the only thing you could poke a hole in with Paul Skeens was if you're Jay, is you're kind of glad it's going to be cold to an extent because A, he's going to be used to it. He played Air Force.
Yeah, right.
Number two, it's going to be a packed house, but like, how rowdy is it really going to be when it's 45 degrees outside? Probably not real rowdy. So I think it's kind of a perfect start because you go in a place where it's going to be a big crowd, but it's not going to be just a raucous crowd. So I think from Paul's standpoint, just continue to do what he's done. I mean, he's one of those guys that I remember, Jamie Tutko sent me some synergy video in the fall of him. And I remember just going through like a minute and a half of it and going, good Lord, like that's just stupid. And he's just continued where he left off. I mean, he's up to 101, 102. You're talking about a guy with a changeup up to 93 and a slider at 85, 88. They just continues to get better and better. So I think for my money, he's the best pitcher in college baseball this year. Chase Dolander for me at Tennessee was kind of that guy coming into the year. But at this point, it's really hard to argue with what Paul's done. I mean, 48 to 4K to walk is pretty incredible. And the last thing is I kind of know what I'm going to get out of the LSU offense. I don't really know what I'm going to get out of the A&M offense. Last year the storyline for those guys was, Mike Early, their hitting coach, and the job he did with that offense. They were a team 2 years ago. It was one of the worst offensive teams in the SEC. Last year, one of the best offensive teams in the country. So far this year, they aren't the worst offensive team in the league, but I mean they've been pretty average. And so I think the big key for them is guys like Ryan Targach and Trevor Werner, assuming he's healthy. They've got to have big weekends. You kind of know what you're going to get out of, Austin Boast. But, I would circle Jace Lavalette, former LSU commit, by the way, who, flipped A&M and ended up, going to A&M. But, he's a big bopper who really outside of Paxton Kling and maybe, Dakota Johnson at Mississippi State, like he was a guy that I kind of thought would be the best freshman in the SEC, and it has not been that way so far. He got a lot of swing and miss. He'll run into one every once in a while, but it's been very, very inconsistent. So he's one of those kids that's kind of scary because it's kind of like Paxton a little bit. Like you're kind of waiting for him just to kind of break out. I just think if you're LSU, it's going to happen at some point. You just hope it's not this weekend.
Well, this baseball preview is brought to our dear friend Kenneth Haynes, attorney at law, and let's hear from Kenny.
Board-certified family law specialist Kenneth P. Haynes is a highly skilled and experienced trial and appeal attorney with over 33 years of experience solving real legal problems for real people, specializing in all aspects of family law, divorce, support, custody, and property. Your standards are high, so are ours. For representation in Northwest Louisiana, call attorney Kenny Haynes at 318-222-2100.
And Kenny is the unofficial official lawyer of TigerBait.com, and he reserves the right to think most clearly for a paying client. We thank him for sponsoring this baseball update. We talk about the weather tonight, but I think the extended forecast is going to be a little nicer tomorrow and Sunday. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be in the mid to upper 50s, but like either cloudy or partly cloudy, no rain. So it'll be better, but still, I'd much rather have 75 and sunny for a series like this.
I thought it was a little odd that for Jay, all the baseball games he's been a part of, to say that he's never been at A&M. He's never played at Texas A&M.
That is interesting. What's also really interesting is, whenever A&M hired Jim Schlossnagle, A&M actually took like a really quick look at Jay Johnson. So just a lot of interesting storylines. Nate Yeski, the pitching coach at A&M, was with Jay Johnson at Arizona. They certainly know each other's style very well. So a lot of interesting angles. Jim Schlossnagle, for at least a small period of time, was in the mix for the LSU job. And so, yeah, it should be a fun series. Just a lot of relationships across the board. Obviously,
what's crazy is, you and I were communicating during that coaching search, and I think Jay's name might have come up early on when we were just tossing out a dozen names, and you were shooting down a bunch of them. And of course, we know there was a favorite, and then that got a little heated. It wasn't true, and I was chasing things that didn't exist and wearing people out. And but Jay Johnson was the guy that a lot of people just didn't look at, didn't think was a possibility, or didn't think it was a fit. I know
that was the biggest thing for
fit.
me. Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me. I had heard like murmurs of Jay's name throughout the process, but I honestly just thought it was like either a smokescreen or like I don't know, like somebody like his agent trying to help him out. But like it did seem like a weird fit. But what's really funny is Jay's been a great fit at LSU. He's one of those guys that is ultra confident. I call him like the silent assassin. Like he is kind of a very reserved, laid back dude when he needs to be. But like when he also needs to be, he's ultra intense. And I think the biggest thing for Jay too is he does not get intimidated by the fans there being, expecting a lot. Like that fuels his fire. Like that doesn't make him paranoid. Like that fuels that dude. I look back at last year at the Southern Miss loss, and if you remember in like the post-game presser, he's like, man, like this isn't happening again. And so like that anger and like that disappointment from LSU fans does not like permeate into him as, oh crap, I'm gonna get fired. It permeates into like, I want to go scorched earth on everybody. And that tells me he's a really good fit.
Well, it was a shocker to me, or I don't know if it's necessarily a shocker, but I thought, like you said, you think he's reserved or shy or an introvert, whatever you want to say. I don't see any of that. In fact, I think he's got a wicked dry sense of humor.
He does.
But I thought maybe, of course, anybody who's covered LSU baseball always loved Paul Mainieri because he would return calls in a hurry. I know that Jay does the same thing. He's very plugged in. But I thought maybe that he might have pared back some of the media stuff that Paul did, in the offseason, or maybe he might do it the first year and then figure out, pick and choose what he wants to do. He hasn't done it. He has absolutely loved the amount of attention that LSU baseball gets here. And I think he's still amazed by it. So it's fantastic to see what's going to be coming down the pike this coming year. Just to switch gears a little bit, is there anything shocking that you've seen in the SEC so far? Anything that is a storyline that maybe you didn't see coming?
I think the biggest thing for me is the number of just ridiculously good teams in this league right now. I mean, the thing about the SEC that's really interesting is every single year you're like, okay, who's going to step up and who's going to take a step back? And I mean, like right now, okay, Georgia came into the season with a lot of question marks. They've got a series win over Georgia Tech already. They've got a midweek series sweep over Georgia Southern. they've gotten off to a great start. We talked about Paxton Clean, Charlie Condon, a freshman for them, hitting like 448 with like eight or nine bombs. You got South Carolina, who this is a big year for Mark Kingston. He needs to win. If he doesn't, they're going to be making a change. So South Carolina off to a great start. They're one of the top home run hitting teams in college baseball. They kind of followed the A&M model. So what they did is they went out and got a bunch of really old transfers, guys with a lot of at-bats, and they're having success with those guys. So they played this weekend. And then Florida, Sully, I mean, if you look back at last year with Sully, that obviously was just a very hairy situation. It wasn't great for him over the last year. Everything's kind of stable, on the home front, in the clubhouse. And you're seeing that. Like, Florida's playing really good baseball. Granted, they don't have Wyatt Langford right now, but they're playing really good baseball. Jack, Caglione is off to a terrific start. Honestly, Dylan Cruz, you sit there and go, okay, well, Dylan Cruz, like, for me, like, by far the best overall player in the SEC. But, Jack Caggs at Florida has got a case. I mean, you're talking about a guy who has a fantastic ERA as a weekend starter, right? He's up to 98, 99 with his fastball. He's got great strikeout to walk ratio. He's hitting well over 400. He's got 13 bombs. And so it's like you would think Dylan Cruz is like the slam dunk player of the year. Like, right now, it'd be a pretty close race between him and Jack. So I think just the year that Jack Caggs is having at Florida is pretty impressive. And then, Tennessee is one of those really odd teams. I feel like Tennessee, like we got them in the top three. I think they're really, really good, but we still don't really know. Like, they had a 1-2 weekend at Arizona opening weekend, and they've been good but not great since then. So what do they do in conference play? And then we talked about Kingston and his need to win. Missouri and Kentucky, two coaches that really need to win. They're off to really good starts. I mean, let's not forget, Missouri opening weekend went 2-1 against the Big 12. So the SEC is just outrageously deep this year.
Well,
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, LSU fans certainly are looking forward to the Vols coming to Baton Rouge. But key to A&M, obviously LSU is favored to win 2 out of 3 or whatever this weekend. But what are the keys for A&M to win this series?
I think the biggest thing for me is try your best to get Paul Skeens out of his groove. I think if you're going to do it, it's going to need to be in elements like this where it might be a little humid, windy, things like that. Getting thinking early. Paul Skeens has been one of those guys that has been in such a groove that, like, at this point you're almost kind of wondering, like, does he remember what it's like to not be in a groove? So sometimes if you get a guy out of his element a little bit, you can have some success. I mean, I wouldn't count on that, but if I'm just trying to poke holes, that'd be a thing. I think the other thing for me is, they're going to have to get really good starts. I do actually really like the back end Aiden's bullpen. Evan Ashenbach for them is been really good. Talking about success stories in college baseball. You're talking about a guy who was like a pitchability lefty at Blinn College last year, and Nate Yeske gets a hold of him, and the dude turns into like a shutdown reliever. Will Johnston, if I remember right, he came out of the bullpen and pitched really well against LSU and Baton Rouge last year. He's turned into elite back end arm. And then Justin Lampkin, a freshman for them, another lefty, by the way, has done a really nice job for them. Whether he's starting in the midweek or coming out of the bullpen on the weekend. So A&M's going to have their starters are going to have to give them length. But at the end of the day, it's all boils down to A&M's offense. If A&M's offense hits at the same clip they had the last couple of weeks, I would be very surprised if they won that series. But again, I have zero doubt that Jim Schlossnagle will have that team ready. I mean, he had them ready last year when they went to Baton Rouge and everybody counted them out. Granted, this LSU team's a heck of a lot better in that one, but he'll have them ready to play.
I think regardless of the weather, I think the A&M fans are going to be raring to go tonight, particularly after what happened in the NCAA tournament last night.
Yeah, they'll be chippy for sure.
And but I want to seriously, though, really promote D1Baseball.com. I go over there and look at y'all's website and the new feature that you guys have on that site. Y'all grow it every year with new things. And I particularly I think y'all should really be doing a job of promoting your YouTube channel. Yeah. I love the podcast that y'all do weekly. LSU fans, go to D1 Baseball find it on YouTube, go in the search box, hit the subscribe button and notification bell. I mean, they do some pretty in-depth YouTube videos there. And I think a lot of people haven't found those yet. And I get after Kendall about promoting those. But certainly, I also think a premium subscription to D1 Baseball if you're a college baseball and an LSU baseball fan, is warranted. It's worth every nickel because they're rolling out content all day, every day, and a huge staff. And talk a little bit about it, Kendall, before we let you out of here.
Yeah, man. I'll just give LSU fans kind of the skinny. I mean, we started the SEC Extra package about 2 months ago. It's gone really well. Actually, right now, if you put in the code SEC Play 23, you can get 23% off of a monthly subscription and an annual subscription that includes any SEC Extra package. So, what we essentially did is, I've had LSU fans ask me, I've had Mississippi State fans ask me, is like, hey, why am I paying more for SEC coverage? Well, we're already doing the same SEC coverage we were before. It's just we hired, Joe Healy and Mark Etheridge. We all know Mark from his old school SEC baseball days. And we're basically just essentially quadrupling the amount of SEC content that we have over what we had before. So, hey, there's a cost to that. So, it's been a huge success. But again, we appreciate any support we can get from Baton Rouge. Obviously, you guys there locally cover that team at an incredible level. But, we'll have a lot of analysis this weekend from the series and certainly moving forward.
You commuting back and forth every day, or are you going to be you go over there and you got a place to stay and you stay all weekend up there?
So my parents will live up there. I'll actually stay there tonight just because it's St. Patty's Day. I don't know if I want to be driving home late at night on St. Patty's Day, but thankfully with all the highways around here, I'm like door to door, like an hour and 5 minutes from Bluebell, even though I live outside of Houston. So I'll be there each day this weekend, and I look forward to it. I haven't seen LSU since Round Rock, and they look very much like an unfinished product of those first 2 days that weekend that I was there. But, boy, they're playing well right now.
And you guys are flipping coins who's coming for the Vol series, right? Or if you don't make it for Vols, you're going to be coming to what series?
Yeah, Mark and I might arm wrestle for that one. I like my chances.
All right. Okay, follow him at Kendall Rogers. He's going to be obviously blogging and tweeting during the whole LSU A&M series, and we thank him for coming on with us. And all right, man, play some ball.
You got it, Mike. Good to see you, buddy.
All right, Kendall, thanks.
Thanks.